Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for this post-budget briefing. For those that haven't met, I'm Jody Vicina, and I work closely with industry, not-for-profits, government and stakeholders across the policy landscape, helping unpack what political and policy decisions mean in practice for businesses and organisations such as last night's budget. I'm very honoured and pleased to be joined by the Assistant Minister, Dr. Andrew Leigh, who will provide insights from inside the government and help us understand the broader economic and public context shaping this budget. I can also add that I had the great pleasure of working with Andrew many years ago now. Andrew was happy to take a few questions at the end, and I encourage people to put any questions you may have for Andrew in the Q&A, and we'll try and get through as many as we can and the most popular ones. So welcome to Andrew. I'll just a bit of a quick background on Dr. Leigh. So as many may know and some may not, Andrew is the Assistant Minister for Productivity, Competition, Charities and Treasury, and the federal member for FENA in the ACT. First elected to the Australian Parliament in 2010, Dr. Leigh has built a reputation as one of Australia's leading economic thinkers and policy advocates with a strong focus and passion on productivity, competition policy, inequality, social capital, and evidence-based reform. He's also been a prolific commentator and author and has written extensively on economics, inequality, innovation, philanthropy and community building, publishing numerous books and published pieces. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us this morning on what is a busy day for you and the government. It's a great honour and pleasure, as I said. So I know it's a busy day, so let's get straight into it. So, Andrew, this is the government's toughest budget to date, the fourth budget. So why now, and what is the core economic story the government is trying to sell?
Well, thanks, Jody. Great to be with you. I'm coming to you from Ngunnawal land, so let me acknowledge the elders on whose lands I'm speaking today. The core message of the budget is that we are doing reform in a time when we need to provide resilience to Australians. As we were putting this budget together at the start of the year, none of us anticipated that we would have the global shock to fuel prices, which have seen oil staying over $100 a barrel for most of the last couple of months. But we've chosen to continue on the reform path. There's a big tax reform package, but a lot of tax reforms that have been called for a long time. Jody, you and I were kicking around as people were noting that the combination of the capital gains tax discount and negative gearing had the effect of driving owner-occupiers out of the market and increasing the investor share at the expense of people buying their first home. We've seen increasingly the disproportionate treatment of investment earnings compared to wage earnings. And we've wanted to do something about housing affordability for a long time. Most of housing affordability is around supply, but a part of it is tax. And the measures that we've announced last night will slow the growth of houses, taking about 2% or $19,000 of the average off house prices according to Treasury modelling. We've also got a big productivity package. I'm really excited about this as the Assistant Minister for Productivity and about the potential to have a huge impact on the productive capacity of the economy. Some of that is through the tax measures, making the instant asset write-off permanent, the benefits for venture capital, the better targeting of R&D on core research. But part of it is also just about getting on with the business of getting rid of unnecessary regulation. We've been working really hard on scrapping unnecessary rules in order to get housing flowing faster, in order to get development flowing better, and in order to make sure that we're not doing duplicate assessment of projects. At the moment, a tradie who wants to access building standards often has to pay for them, and those building standards will be free as a result of this budget.
Yeah. No, that's a really good, and I'll be touching on this later in one of the tax changes. And as you say, when you and I were kicking around in the late 90s, it was actually Peter Costello who first flagged taxing trusts, for instance. And here we are 27 years later that it's taken your government to actually, effectively legislate it and take on a tough issue. And I'll talk to that more further when I do a bit of a presentation on it. But Andrew, look, the obvious question. The PM and the government in particular is going to be accused and has been accused that this is a budget of broken promises. So what's your response to that?
Well, we need to get the settings right for what Australians need. I get approached about housing probably more than any other issue on my street stalls. And frequently people will say, look, the settings are terrific for baby boomers buying their fourth house. They're not so good for a young couple buying their first. And you can see it in the statistics, the steady drop off in the home ownership rate over the last couple of decades, and an acceleration away of house prices at that point at which the capital gains tax discount was introduced. So we do need to do something to make homes more affordable. It's incumbent on us to be out there making the case for reform. We're certainly going to be doing that over the next few weeks. Just as we explained our position on our changed position on the stage 3 tax cuts, so too we'll be out there explaining our changed position around negative gearing and capital gains.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a challenge, and it's an interesting one too. I mean, some of the commentary this morning is obviously around the government's choosing, I suppose, not a war of generations, but certainly you can look at it and go, there's a certain generation that will go, this probably makes sense, as opposed to those, dare I say, like boomers who go, well, hang on a sec, you promised not to do this. So what do you think in terms of the government's intention around that, and how do you sort of marry those contradictions in terms of an older generation going, well, but we're saving for our future, you disrupted that, versus those that are approaching you, as you're saying, going, well, I can't even get my first house?
Yeah, Jody, I mean, there's a technocratic answer to that and then a kind of deeper answer. The technocratic answer is that if you've got an existing investment property that's grandfathered, that won't be affected by these changes. And if you want to buy a new property and negatively gear it, you can do that because you're adding to total housing supply. You're giving something back to the community by extending the housing stock. In that sense, the changes to a negative gearing match the way in which we treat foreign investors who can buy new built homes but not existing homes. But the deeper answer is that the people who approach me on my street stalls to talk about housing affordability aren't just young people. Their parents and grandparents are worried that their kids won't be able to afford a home of their own, noting that they were able to do so at a time when houses cost maybe 4 or 5 times annual earnings. But that now houses are costing 8, 10 times our annual earnings. Homes are being pushed out of reach of many young Australians. So that issue of home ownership isn't just an issue for the generation that is at the bleeding edge. It's also an issue for their parents. I made a joke on Mother's Day when we did a housing announcement with the Treasurer and the Housing Minister that while flowers and brunch are great for mum, maybe the best gift you can give to mum is allowing the adult children to finally move out and buy a place of their own.
Yeah, no, I did see that, and I did I did have a bit of a chuckle. Andrew, I know we've got some representatives from the not-for-profit sector on board today, which is great. Look, they play a big role in the community, and you've actually written a lot, both in your time as obviously a professor and in terms of, I think, your PhD, touched on things like social inequality and that, and they play a big role in the social fabric of our society. So is the government considering any further reform to the sector?
Yeah, absolutely, Jody. We commissioned a Productivity Commission review in our first term, which came back recommending a range of changes. Some of those we've implemented, getting rid of the $2 donation deduction threshold so Round Up for Charity can work, increasing the contribution from giving funds to 6%, and so we get more money flowing to charities. Some of those recommendations also are to do with reforming the deductible gift recipient system, and so that more charities are able to access tax-deductible donations. Currently, organisations such as animal welfare and public media tend to be locked out of that system, and it's a system of about 50 different categories where you've got to be in one category. You can't span the categories. It's certainly not the way anyone would design it if you were starting from scratch today. So that's the big item on the to-do list for us. And it is, as you say, urgent in the context of an Australia where we're seeing declining levels of trust, declining levels of joining, and declining levels of volunteering. Robert Putnam wrote Bowling Alone back in 2000. I wrote Disconnected in 2010. Both of those books documented a decline over the previous generation in community engagement. But that problem's only continued to worsen in recent years.
Yeah. Andrew, a broad question here. So 4 years, I mean, your fourth budget, it really is a case of this budget, going hard. There's some big reform options that the government's putting forward. So how does this budget position Australia for a more uncertain global economy? I mean, coming into January, no one would have predicted what's happening in the Middle East, and the Treasury to the uncertainty of the current times that we're now in. So how do you see this budget and what the government's announced last night as positioning Australia to basically tackle those headwinds?
Yeah, great question, Jody. Obviously, record spending in defence, and as we look to bolster our national security, and also investments in fuel security. We'll be taking the minimum stockholding obligation up to 50 days and putting in place a national fuel reserve. So there's billions of dollars that are being invested in that national fuel reserve and in ensuring that we have the resilience in order to deal with future fuel shocks.
Yeah. No, that makes sense because obviously, there's we're all hopeful that what's going on in the Middle East will come to an end, but who knows? And we're in the hands of one President Trump who is mercurial, to be polite, in regards to that. Some big announcements last night in health, Andrew, and I'll be talking about this a bit more. But a bit of an overview in regards to some of the health initiatives that really do build on the government's commitment, I think, to primary health care since it's come into power back in 2022.
Yeah, thank you, Jody. The urgent care clinic network's now been expanded across the country so that by July, almost all Australians will live within a 20-minute drive of an urgent care centre. That means people are able to go in and get quick health care using their Medicare card, not their credit card. And the investments in bulk billing are now seeing bulk billing coming back to parts of the country where it's been uneconomic. Here in the ACT, we've got a whole lot of bulk billing clinics springing up right across the Capital Territory, which we just haven't had in the past. There's been barely any bulk billing in Canberra. That's now turning around. And a lot of that's funded out of the tough but necessary changes that we're making on the National Disability Insurance Scheme, moving to an assessment which is focused on the functional capacity rather than condition diagnosis, looking at what people can do and therefore what supports they need, and providing supports such as Thriving Kids, which allow early intervention for kids on the autism spectrum in a way which is going to benefit them more and means that they're not reliant on the National Disability Insurance Scheme in perpetuity. There will be a lot of planned reassessments. Again, all of this is about making sure that the NDIS, a proud Labor creation, is there for future generations.
Look, with the NDIS, obviously, no one disputes the value and the need for it in the community, as we well know. But it certainly, as a spending program, is, I think, in some ways an example of how good intentions can become a blown-out fiscal cost on the budget. Hence, Mark Butler a few weeks ago gave basically a speech outlining the changes to the NDIS. How hard do you think it is going to be for the government to be able to sell those NDIS reforms to the public?
Look, I've been pleasantly surprised at the way in which they've been received and the grace and the disability community to recognise the challenge that the government is facing and the need for reform. That's a process which is an ongoing conversation, and the government's committed to working with disability sector peak bodies in order to make sure that we get the right results. This isn't about taking the NDIS away from somebody with a profound disability, but it is about providing better supports in order to ensure that people are able to live their best lives. And in some cases, that won't just be on the NDIS. We have that lovely line from Bill Shorten that when the NDIS is the only ship in the ocean, then people will naturally cling on to it. But you need to provide a broader set of supports which are better tailored to people's needs.
Andrew, I know you're incredibly passionate about productivity. It's in your title as Assistant Minister. The Treasurer alluded to productivity a number of times last night. So what are the major reforms basically encapsulated last night, and what further do you think that the government and the nation has to do to drive better productivity? Because I think, as you've spoken about many times, and the Treasurer does, without increasing productivity, in effect, our living standards effectively at best remain stagnant and at worst go backwards. So, I don't know, I know it's a passionate policy area, so could you lead with some thoughts there?
Absolutely, Jody. I think of productivity as being the three I's: investing in individuals, in infrastructure, and in institutions. We've already seen record investment in individuals through early childhood, free TAFE, and opening up more university spots. We've seen the investment in infrastructure through record road and rail spending and rolling out the national broadband network, full fibre to the home, to more and more Australian households. But this budget really focuses on the last I, investing in institutions, and it's getting more national competition policy. So, for example, workers are able to work across state borders without having to redo their occupational licensing. It's about, as I mentioned before, ensuring that tradies don't have to pay to access standards, because people shouldn't have to pay to know what the law is. And it's about working to ensure that our planning and zoning systems aren't tripping over their own feet. At the moment, regulation is adding hundreds of thousands of dollars to the cost of a new home. We can do that more efficiently by working with states and territories. Things like the New South Wales Pattern Book that sets out a range of beautiful, environmentally sound homes and allows people to choose from a menu rather than starting from scratch. In some sense, we may look at building homes more like we get cars, where you don't make an infinite choice about the shape and style of the car, but you choose from a range of models that are available. That allows us to have factory-built homes, which are more environmentally sound, cheaper to build, and helps us to deal with the housing affordability challenge that the country faces.
No, thanks, Andrew. What I might do is throw it out to those online. Look, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box there on the public chat, and we can put them to Andrew. I'll continue, but as soon as someone, if they have a question they want to ask Andrew, I'll obviously switch to that. Andrew, some unique political times, and I think it would be remiss not to ask the rise of One Nation. We saw the Farrer by-election on Saturday. We saw them gain 7 seats in South Australia, both the lower house and the upper house combined. What's your general political take at the moment on the rise of One Nation, and what does it mean for the political landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think now the coalition are finding themselves increasingly choosing to fight One Nation rather than to fight Labor, and that makes it hard for them to be the party that Robert Menzies founded them as, a party that was always Liberal, never Conservative. They've chosen to fuel outrage over immigration, and I think that's only raising the salience of that issue has only caused people who are worried about it to say, well, if I want no migrants, then I'm going to go for the No Migrant Party, not for the One Nation light that I think some on the right perceive the coalition to be. So you saw them get a walloping at the Farrer by-election. That really was an appalling result in a seat where the Liberal Party was originally founded. The complete collapse of the Liberal Party vote in just the course of a year. And they don't seem to have learned many useful lessons out of that. You know, you had Tim Wilson the day after the election saying that he'd be open to forming a coalition with One Nation, and then having to scramble around and wind that back in the next couple of days. They're not really sure whether they're Arthur or Martha, and if you don't know which way you're going, any path will get you there. So the coalition is in a dark place. In some sense, you can think of their position now as being where the Labor Party were in the 1950s. It's might be politically beneficial to my party. It is, though, I think not good for the country to have one of the serious parties of government floundering around and deciding that its best hope to power is to tack right rather than move to the sensible centre.
Yeah. Look, we have a good question here, Andrew, on your favourite topic of productivity. So it's the budget paper still referenced productivity growth at a modest 1.2%. What is holding it back, and what more can be done?
Yeah, we've got a range of productivity challenges that have been in the economy for over a decade. You're seeing a productivity slowdown across the advanced world, with the exception of the United States. Part of that is the regulatory challenges we talked about before. Our EPBC reforms are an important part of that, ensuring that we don't have slow approval times slowing down important major projects. The housing work is a key part of that. And, I guess philosophically you can think of this as being tied to that terrific book by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson, Abundance, which makes the case that you need to progressive politics which is focused on building things. And also, Jody, a progressive politics that is optimistic about technology, making good use of AI in an ethical way that grows jobs, allows workers a say, and then provides returns to labour as well as to capital, is, I think, one of the best hopes we have for productivity growth in the future. If we get it right, if AI is used in order to augment jobs, take away the boring bits and make the interesting bits even more interesting, then that's a potential productivity boost for the economy.
Yeah, great. Andrew, I know you've got to go in a few minutes because you have other commitments. So last question. So for those businesses and organisations and not-for-profits with us today, if they took away 1 to 2 key messages from the budget, what should they be?
This is a reforming treasurer and a reforming government. We're keen to not just mark time, but to make a difference. And what we're doing with this budget is tackling the huge challenge of intergenerational equity. I aspire to a politics not of scarcity, in which we're fighting over a zero-sum spoils, but in which we increase the productive capacity of the economy, in which people are able to buy a home with the same sort of ready comfort that people are able to buy a car right now. I aspire to an Australia in which we have strong worker rights operating and in conjunction with good technological advances. And the work that the industry minister and the assistant industry minister have done there is really fundamental to the country. And it's about making sure that a strong social safety net continues to be available. The work that we've done around ensuring the sustainability of the NDIS is part, but not all, of the budget savings that are in place. We need to bring the budget deficit back under control. We've already brought budget deficits down very considerably from where they were when we came into office in 2022. There's a lot more work to be done there in order to make sure that we've got that piece of the intergenerational equity puzzle just right.
Yeah. Andrew, just quickly, because I know you've got to go, but one last question, if you could, quick comment. Someone's asked, could you comment on the position of health and medical research in this budget, please?
Yes, big emphasis on health and medical research. We're keen to ensure that we boost medical research. A lot of the work that we're doing around the R&D tax credit is around research capability, boosting up that core research, increasing the R&D benefits for new firms, and recognising the big benefits that the medical sector delivers to Australia. So thank you to those who are working in the sector. We're proud as a government to be working so collaboratively with you.
Andrew, look, thanks so much on what is a busy day, obviously post the budget. You're obviously part of the Treasury team, so I know demands on your time today are pretty intense. So the fact that you've taken time out to join us today, on behalf of everybody, really appreciate it, and enjoy the budget sell.
Thanks, Jerry. Real pleasure to be chatting with you today. Take care.